Hello, I'm Shaun McKinley, International Director of Children's Ministries. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's Children's Ministries webinar, In the Details. I've often heard it said, the devil is in the details. But the truth is that most times it's the Lord that's in the details. Think of all the biblical accounts where some of the small details led to God's greatest works being accomplished. As leaders, it's in the details where we give direction, clear up confusion, enable success, and enhance commitment, not only within ourselves, but also those we lead. So during this webinar, we will hear from 3 presenters on some of the details that help make children's ministry more effective. We will be discussing how to help our volunteers thrive, how to keep our ministry safe, and the importance of having written policies and procedures. Throughout the evening, we will announce our giveaway winners on social media. So if you've registered for this webinar, you are already entered into that drawing. If you've not yet registered, please visit our website immediately to be entered at cogop.org/children. Outlines for tonight's webinar presentations are also available on our website. Also, throughout the night, we invite you to share what you're learning on social media. Connect with others who are participating in this webinar by using the hashtag CGPKids. I'm so excited to introduce our first presenter this evening, Adam Duckworth. Adam Duckworth is the lead communicator at Downtown Harbor Church, a forward-thinking church committed to reaching families and embracing culture in its community. Members of this church come from more than 70 different nations. In previous work, Adam revolutionized the volunteer culture by creating opportunities for volunteers to serve, leading them toward a common goal, and leveraging the influence of the next generation to volunteer as well. In addition to his work at Downtown Harbor Church, Adam leads conferences for volunteers, and he serves as a communicator at Orange, a nonprofit devoted to influencing those who influence the next generation. Adam is the co-author of Not Normal: 7 Quirks of Incredible Volunteers. Tonight, Adam is sharing on the topic of helping volunteers thrive. Welcome, Adam.
Hey everybody, my name is Adam Duckworth and I am so thrilled to be with you all here today for this volunteer webinar series. And so before we dive in, this is a little bit of an unusual background for me because normally I do these type of interactive things in a studio or maybe at an organization on a stage, but because we are still kind of in the middle of somewhat of a quarantine, I am coming to you from my home office, which is highly related to Disney paraphernalia and things. So with all of the things in the background, I apologize for the distractions. If you want to focus on what all those things are behind me, you probably have a good time. You can pause this and check it out. But I love volunteering, and I've leaned into volunteers kind of my entire adult career, and I'm thrilled to be here with you today on this webinar. We're going to chat for about 20-25 minutes talking about the idea of helping volunteers succeed. And I love this topic because it's something that I've been really thinking about and marinating on for a long time and trying to put pen to paper on. I got a chance a number of years ago to begin writing about volunteering. So I've written 3 books on volunteering throughout my time in ministry and in the church world and in the nonprofit world. And I've had a good time doing this. And so I just love talking about this idea of volunteers and what they look like and who they are and how they give back. And I love volunteers because, number one, I started as a volunteer in my local church. It's been about 20 years now, hard to believe that it was that long ago, but I started out as a kindergarten and first grade boys small group leader and got a chance to lean into them and have some conversations, and it was so eye-opening to me, but it allowed me to kind of plug into the local church in a different and a unique way. And I love volunteers because volunteers, for whatever, have figured out that they have said yes to give themselves to a cause bigger than themselves for free. And what does that look like? How do they do that? How would they do that? And furthermore, how could we as leaders help volunteers succeed? And how could we help them do what they do even better? How could we help them understand their roles in a different way? How could we help them serve more? How could we get monthly volunteers to convert to weekly volunteers and give back even more than they do? That's a question that, man, is such an interesting and great question. And I just hope not that we have all the answers in this webinar here today, not that we figure out everything in this webinar here today, but one of the things that I hope that we get to do together is I just hope we get to have a little bit of a conversation, and I believe that we will do that, and I believe that we'll talk about some of the interesting things about volunteering versus some of the things that hopefully we hear about volunteering. So anyway, without further ado, let me just make a couple of points, right? So I just believe that for our volunteers, if we want them to succeed and we want them to do better, then we as leaders have a responsibility to lead them in a direction. I kind of just say over and over again that volunteers aren't necessarily going to lead themselves. It's not going to happen. And so one of the things that I just want to kind of bring up in front of everybody here is that volunteering for our volunteers is draining. I don't know if you know this, but volunteering is draining. You got to think about these people, right? They have lives and spouses and kids and jobs and activities and sporting events and all the things that goes into life in 2020 and beyond. We just have to understand that when you sign up to give yourself to a cause bigger than yourself for free, that volunteering is really a draining thing. It's one of those things that we just have to kind of all agree on and set the playing field. And furthermore, we heard from volunteers, so we asked them a question, right? Hey, volunteers, what are some things that you don't hear every week as we talk about helping them succeed? We talk about some things that they hear back and forth. We just said oftentimes, you know what they didn't hear? You made such a difference in my life this week. Now, we kind of expect that, right, from preschoolers and elementary age kids. We really don't expect them to walk into their volunteers, hands, or even students. We don't expect them to put their hand in the hand of their volunteers and say, thank you so much. You've really helped me take different steps and different paths forward in the direction of my life this week. And we're not going to hear that from a 4-year-old. Here's another thing that we just said that volunteers didn't necessarily hear a lot. The story you help tell will stick with these kids forever. Right? It's not something that they hear a lot. Let me talk to you then about some things that volunteers said that they heard quite a bit. And so here's some things and these might blow your mind, or they may not blow your mind, but if we're talking about just helping volunteers succeed, we want to start with our language and how we talk with volunteers. Here's some of the things that volunteers told us when we were compiling some data and interviews and all those things that they heard consistently. One of the things we heard them say consistently is, we are short-staffed. Interesting. So volunteers would show up to give themselves to a cause bigger than themselves for free, and sometimes their leaders would consistently tell them that they're short-staffed. Interesting. Here's one for you. No, sorry, that's the third one. I'm looking at my notes here on the screen. Here's the second one. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you signed up to volunteer. I'm glad that you're engaging with us, but we really need you to show up on time. Have you ever heard that one? And the third one that I was going to mention a couple of seconds ago was one of the things we heard volunteers say to us that they're told pretty often is, well, maybe we'd succeed more. Maybe if you worked a little harder. Okay, that's not one that they heard consistently. That was a little joke. But they do hear consistently, we're short-staffed. We need you to show up on time. We need you to read your curriculum in advance. We're really low in, our staffing in terms of our room, right? But one of the things that we said is that we want to help volunteers succeed. And this kind of all comes back to language, and this comes kind of all back to us leading them in a different direction. We just were reminded that as leaders, one of the biggest things that we can do related to volunteers is to understand the idea that volunteers need encouragement and volunteers need reminders, okay? So volunteers need encouragement and volunteers need reminders. And they need a whole bunch of other things as it goes into there. They need, and we could get specific with these things. They need encouragement about each week when they serve. They need encouragement about what they've done. They need encouragement when they have a bad week. They need reminders about so many things, not just the mundane tasks that go into volunteering, but things that they need to be reminded about: vision, why they're there, how great the organization's doing, how great the ministry's doing, right? And so one of the things that we just said is we started to ask ourselves a question. Okay, reminders about what? Okay, specifically, if we were going to ask ourselves, reminders about what? So we just said if we want volunteers to succeed, that volunteers need to be reminded about a couple of things. Number one, we just think that volunteers need to be reminded why they are there in the first place, right? Why they're there in the first place. And this kind of hits a lot of people when I say it square between the eyes, because what they realize, this is so key, don't miss this. What they realize is that there is definitely a contrast in the way that they're leading, because they're leading based on administration and they're not leading with vision. Did you hear what I said? They're leading with administration and they're not leading with vision. So therefore, all of the things that they're doing is they are trying to fill holes in their rooms. They're trying to make sure they have enough staff. They're trying to make sure the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. And by the way, those are good things. We should be doing those. But we're not leading with those things. We're leading with administration and we're not leading with vision. So if we want volunteers to succeed, we should ask ourselves this question. What are we reminding them of? They need encouragement. They need reminders. What are we reminding them of? So the question is this: how often do you go back to casting vision? How often do you go back to casting vision? If you've been in leadership circles for any length of time, you've probably heard this analogy that vision is like a big bucket with holes in the bottom, and you dump water in the bucket and the water just keeps pouring out. And what do you have to do as a leader? Keep filling that bucket back up. You should be casting vision consistently. It should be every event, every weekend, every conversation. The why behind what they do should be as important as what they do. How often do you go back to casting vision? Because if we want volunteers to succeed and we focus on those two things, encouragement and reminders, then we've got to go back to go, okay, how often are we reminding them about the why behind what they do? The other question is related to casting vision is not just do you cast it because you should be. You should be asking yourself, do I have a plan, or how often should I be casting vision from a large scale net? Right? Is it something that volunteers can kind of grasp onto and put their hands around it, right? Is vision something that is tangible, that they can see? And don't miss this, when you achieve the vision with your volunteers, when someone comes to Christ, when a small group wins, when a story works, whatever that looks like in your space, do you ever go back and celebrate the vision that is actually won? So if we're going to remind volunteers and help them succeed, we're going to first of all remind them of why they're there in the first place. The second thing we're going to remind them of is this: it's what they're doing is making a difference, right? Is what they're doing is making a difference. One of the things that when I had the absolute privilege, one of the privileges of my life to write Not Normal, 7 Quirks of Incredible Volunteers with Sue Miller, that we actually sat back and said something, and we really wanted to put this in the book, so we put it in chapter 7, our final kind of closing chapter, because we kind of wanted to go out with this battle cry, this big thing with volunteers. And one of the things that we said, and it really just hit us, was that a lot of volunteers walk away thinking that what they did that week or that month or that hour or whatever it is, that it just really didn't matter. And so we started to ask ourselves the question about how can we help communicate to volunteers that not only what they're doing matters, but what they're doing is making a difference. So we kind of coined this phrase. And we coined this phrase and we called it, "You can't always see it." It was the idea that when you showed up every single week specifically to work with kids or teenagers or maybe at any position inside of the local church, that the results were not immediate. And that's hard, right? Because one of the things that we just said over and over again is that we are in a society where we want results quick. Boom, messages come through. Boom, texts come through. Facebook messages come through. Emails come through. We get immediate things and it happens. We order something on Amazon and boom, it's here. Maybe within a day, maybe within hours, depending on where you live. And so one of the things that we told church leaders over the course of time in Not Normal, 7 Quirks of Incredible Volunteers, was just because you can't always see it, just because the results are not immediate, doesn't mean that it's not happening. And so what we want to do as leaders is we want to encourage to remember those two things. We want to remind them about why they're here in the first place, number one, and number two, what they're doing is making a difference. So I want to ask you a couple of questions as leaders related to this idea of reminding our volunteers, because we want them to succeed. And this is all related, right? It's all related in the idea that if we want them to win and succeed, then we're going to encourage them and we're going to remind them about what they're doing and why they're there, and that makes a difference, because we want them to come back. We want them to feel fired up. We want them to know that they're a part of something that matters. And this is kind of how all looped in together Because I could do a 10-part webinar series on how to help volunteers succeed and helping volunteers win and all those kinds of things. But for today, I just kind of wanted to focus on a couple of those things, the encouragement and then the reminders. And so to remind them what they're doing is making a difference, I just ask you a couple of questions. So the first one's this: are things so busy that you rarely slow down? Are things so busy that you rarely slow down? Because you're not going to remind your volunteers, and your volunteers are not going to be reminded that they are making a difference unless you take a minute and you step back and you slow down. I know this is cliche and nobody does it, but my nickel's worth of free advice to anyone who's listening to this webinar is you should do it and slow down and take a moment and catch your breath. We understand, I understand, Sunday's always coming, midweek's always coming, weekends are always coming. There's another round of curriculum, more rooms to fill, there's more people to plug in, there's new families coming, there's more kids coming, there's more teenagers coming, there's props for the Bible story, there's supplies for your small group activities, there's all the things that go into it. You may have a little anxiety listening to what I just said. I may have a little anxiety listening to what I just said. However, I consider it to be very, very true. So the question is, are things so busy that you actually never slow down? Because if you don't slow down, it's going to be hard to actually take a minute and to remind yourself or your volunteers that they're actually making a difference. The first thing you got to do is slow down. The first thing you got to do is carve out time to spend time with your volunteers, specifically those key leaders in your ministry, to remind them that they're making a difference. I believe strongly in a coaching structure. That could be another subset of things on volunteering in terms of what we're doing, in terms of some of the podcasting world and those kinds of things. We've talked about that. But one of the things that I would always make a point to do is once a month, I would ask every single person on our coaching team to go out to lunch. And we would have, whether that was individually or in a group setting with a couple of them, and we would just sit down and have a conversation and slow down. And what we would do is we would actually kind of slow down and go, how are things going? Give me the situation report. Let's laugh. Let's talk about the trials. Let's talk about the wins, and let's move forward together. And one of the great ideas that came out of one of these coaching meetings that I would have with my coaches was we decided that we were going to take a minute and we were going to slow down enough that we were going to decide to get our volunteers together every so often. Don't miss this. It's so key. With no agenda. So we had kind of a party for our volunteers. I've talked about this on a number of platforms, including the Volunteer Guy podcast that we launched a number of months ago. If you're not following that, that's a really cool thing to check out. We just talk with leaders and volunteers every single week about volunteering and what that looks like. But when we were talking about this idea of making a difference and helping volunteers see that they're making a difference, one of the things that we found out that we could do was just pour into them and invest in them. That led us to create an event with no agenda. It was kind of just like one big party. And it was so funny to watch the volunteers come in because everybody was like, okay, when's the meeting start? When are we going to go through the handbook? And we're like, we're not. We're just hanging out. And people were almost taken back to a point where they did not know what to do with it. So the question is this: are things so busy that you haven't taken a second and slowed down and thought about how you could let your volunteers know consistently that they are actually making a difference in the lives of the people that they serve? Because I'll tell you this, if things are consistently so busy, then they are never going, you're never going to help them understand that they're making a difference if you're just running the constant rat race on the constant hamster wheel of life in terms of staffing and in terms of making this happen. That's the first question under the idea of what they're doing making a difference. The second one is this. It's a really cool one. Do you tell stories? Do you tell stories? Because I'll tell you, a lot of people don't. One of the things that I love to do is tell stories of other volunteers. When you've seen a story, when you've heard a story, when you've experienced a story, we would do everything we could to tell that story to the volunteers at large. Because as we talk about the idea that you can't always see it, we talk about the idea that just because you can't always see it doesn't mean it's not happening. It's the idea that even though one volunteer may not be able to see it, doesn't mean that another volunteer hasn't experienced it. So we would take an opportunity to tell these stories, whether it was on social media or we bring in a video crew and we just sit down and do an interview with the volunteer who had a story to tell about life change or about moving in a different direction in terms of volunteering. There was so many stories we told. Stories over time offer perspective, right? Stories over time offer perspective into someone else's journey, into someone else's world. And so I just believe that if you want to help volunteers be encouraged, right, and be reminded that what they're doing is making a difference, that you got to tell some stories every now and then. That every so often you got to get around the table and figure out, how can we communicate a win? How can we communicate a win to the rest of the team, that even though that they may not be experiencing something, or they may have had a discouraging week, that lo and behold, it can happen and it will happen and it does happen. So what does that look like? Do you tell stories? And the last thing is this. So the question, are things so busy that you rarely slow down? Number 2, do you tell stories? And number 3, do you ever celebrate what you do? Do you ever take a second and celebrate what you do? And I'm not just talking here's the deal, gang. It's so easy to just get your volunteers together, right? I'm talking about, do you ever stop and celebrate what you do? Do you review your year? Do you get everybody around the table and have a conversation or have a dialogue about how the year went? And man, can you believe this person experienced life change and that person experienced life change? And so much of the inspirational things behind that, I think the reason my heart breaks for this issue is because it's rarely shared. And in the leaders and organizations that I've seen or I've consulted with or I've leaned into over the course of time, it's just been one of those ideas or things that has been rarely shared. And so if you want to help volunteers be reminded that they're making a difference, you got to celebrate the wins. You got to get everybody together every now and then and have one big old party and talk about what God's done, because he's moved in miraculous ways. The question is, has he moved in a way, because you've seen it, that has allowed you to not only tell stories, but recognize it and celebrate it with the rest of the team? Because those are good, amazing things, and those need to happen. And what happens is, when you celebrate, is the celebrating is contagious. The celebrating allows the volunteers to take that back as they go in for another week or another year or another month, whatever that looks like. And the celebrating allows them to slow down and understand that, wow, what I'm doing and what I'm a part of, even though it may not be directly related to me and me personally. It may be one of those things that when they see that the team is winning, they understand that they win. When's the last time you've gotten your volunteers together to celebrate? When's the last time your volunteers have gotten together and actually had one big old party celebrating what God has done through their and their teammates' efforts throughout the last little bit? One of the things I love as I talk about helping volunteers succeed is and again, we could sit here and have a conversation for an hour and a half, but I've told I only have about 25 minutes because I'm to keep this short. It's the idea that volunteers would need 2 things. They would need to be encouraged, and they would need to be reminded, right? They would need encouragement, and that they would need reminders. And I think the encouragement speaks for itself, that they need to know that what they're doing and when they show up matters. And then they need to be reminded that why they're there in the first place and why they're making a difference. Because I'll leave you with this thought. You've probably experienced this. You've probably lived here. You've probably dealt with this. It's the idea that God is working through the hard weeks, through the long weeks, through the good weeks, through the bad weeks, through the ups and through the downs. And always volunteers, when they come back, always kind of echo the same thing. Is that, Adam, I'm having trouble seeing it. I keep giving my time. I keep giving my time. And you can't always see it. In fact, you might be able to rarely see it. But just because you can't always see it, it doesn't mean that it's not happening. Some of those very minor tweaks and very minor pieces of encouragement and reminders consistently built into a schedule surrounding your year might actually help volunteers succeed in a little bit of a different way.
Well, welcome back, everybody. And again, thanks for joining us for tonight's webinar. Here with me again this month is Joy Henclsy, who is the training specialist here in International Children's Ministries. And so, Joy, what'd you think about that presentation?
I thought it was great. There was a lot of challenging points that when he said that, I was like, oh, I need to work on that a little bit more in my children's ministry.
Yeah, well, I really could not think of anyone better than Adam to speak to us tonight about helping our volunteers thrive. His book, Not Normal, is an excellent resource, and I recommend it to anybody who's watching. As a matter of fact, we're going to give away one. If you've registered for this webinar, you're entered into that giveaway tonight. But yeah, I love the two areas that he focused on tonight: encouragement and celebrating and sharing reminders. So many times, as he said, we tend to lean into our administrative responsibilities and duties, and we often forget really to share vision with our people and to celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what else really stuck out to you during that presentation?
I think for me, a lot of times, because we know we all have those frustrations with our volunteers, and when he was talking about how when we complain about how we're short-staffed or how we need them to show up on time, because we all know that feeling when you have kids showing up but your teachers aren't there, and it is frustrating.
Yeah.
But I think that reminder of that they are part of something that's greater than just teaching, and just having that vision and knowing that yes, these details do matter, but you're being part of God's call and the call to serve kids. And I think sometimes we can definitely overlook that. Sure. And just get so caught up in the nitty gritty. Right. And get angry.
Right.
And
yeah, sometimes the stress of it hits us when we're with our volunteers, and that really convicted me. I know that so often, if we're short-staffed in an area, we sometimes will grumble, make comments, or complain, and not really think about the volunteer that's standing in front of us, and really show our appreciation and gratitude for what we do have, I guess.
Yeah, and they are busy. Like he was talking about how they're drained. They already work jobs. They have families, and a lot of times, as the children's pastor, the leader, it's our ministry, and so we might kind of look at it a little bit differently because it's what God has called us to 100%. Yet they're willing to fill in, so we're putting those expectations on them that might be a little unrealistic sometimes.
Joy and I have a favorite children's ministry leader, and one of the things that she talks about is creating a confetti culture.
Yes.
Where you just really are celebrating constantly the people that are ministering with you and their achievements. I think that really came out in this presentation, and we really have to celebrate and to communicate what's happening in our ministries and our wins. So whether it's individually with volunteers or maybe in a big setting where you all celebrate together, I know for me that's something I'm really walking away from this presentation. I need to do a better job celebrating the achievements and the contributions of the people around me.
Yeah, and he also talked a lot about sharing vision regularly with your volunteers, and I know that's probably something that you've done before. So what are some ways that maybe, Shaun, that you've shared vision with your children's volunteers?
Sure. Well, in the past, of course, now I'm in this role, I'm not a full-time children's pastor, but when I was, there were two things that I really found that helped to share vision, and one was sort of an annual banquet we did with our volunteers where they would come together, a simple meal, nothing complicated, but just an opportunity to thank them for their work, their contribution, and to share vision for the future, to remind them why we do what we do. But another great opportunity that I came to love, and I can't take credit for this, it came from Craig Jatella. He talked about the importance of having what he called VIP meetings. So I would do that every month, usually right before a Sunday service, where we would gather together, and VIP stood for Vision, Information, and Prayer. And so once a month we'd gather our volunteers just for 15 minutes. We'd share a quick celebration or an idea about vision, again reminding them of sort of the deposits we're making in the lives of the kids we serve and their families, sharing information, anything that they need to know about the coming month or reminders, and then of course praying together. I think, although it didn't come out in this presentation, something that's so important is that we pray with our volunteers and those who minister with us. And so I love that idea. Again, every month we just gather for 15 minutes for that VIP time.
And I love cards and writing cards, and I'm just amazed sometimes about how much that'll mean to a volunteer, just sending them a word of encouragement. Thank you for being here. Thank you for serving. I really appreciate it. And, they'll tell me, hey, I still have this card that I kept from you. So those words of encouragement really do mean a lot.
Sure. And on that same note, this is October. This is Clergy Appreciation Month. A lot of times we think about our pastors or our leaders, but really, if you have volunteers who are serving, particularly those who are maybe in children's church or even teachers, October's a great excuse to celebrate them.
Absolutely.
So, all right, well, we got a lot out of that presentation, so that was wonderful. I hope you did as well.
Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans for good and not evil, plans for an expected future and hope. Wow, what a fantastic, encouraging scripture that applies to everyone all over this world. Of course, it means something different to every person depending upon what season you're walking through. But what a promise and what a hope. He has my future and your future in the palm of his hand. I'm excited to tell you that we are partnering with the Future of Children in El Salvador. A little over a year ago, KidsServe was launched. And through this initiative, the very first goal, a lofty one, is $100,000 in order to either expand or build from the ground up schools in El Salvador. Currently, our children's ministry in El Salvador is reaching 2,000 to 2,500 kids a day. That includes feeding them every day, clothing, sometimes shelter. It includes education. And most importantly, it includes sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ, sharing about that future that Jeremiah spoke about. We are asking you to partner with us. This Christmas season is almost here. Yes, I said it. Christmas is almost here, 60 plus days away, and we will celebrate the blessed holiday of Christmas. We are asking you to partner with KidsServe and adopt a future. What does that look like? For $10, you can adopt the future of a child in El Salvador. Sometimes we give gifts and they are just a short-term, short-lived gift. After a few days or maybe a few months, that gift is gone or tossed aside. Maybe it's a gift that's perishable and it's already been used up. But you are going to invest in the future of a child in El Salvador. Many people will say, my budget only allows for a $10 gift. Fantastic. We'll take that $10. Or maybe you say, you know what? I want to invest in 100 futures. And so we'll take your check for $1,000. This is a great opportunity for your church to come together, all ages, all ministries, all walks of life, and ask them to help invest in the future and to adopt the future of an El Salvadorian child. We are so close to our goal. This has only happened because of faithfulness of men and women like you who have stepped outside of the box, who have had some great fundraisers and been very creative in the way that you've sent money. And for that, we are eternally grateful. But we want to reach this goal by December 31st, 2020. There will be a link below that tells you where that you can send your offering to. We're going to ask you to mark it, adopt a future. And this Christmas, maybe you want to give a gift in someone's memory or someone's honor. Perhaps you and your family have decided this is a year we're not going to exchange gifts, but we want to make a difference and an impact in the life of someone else. We ask you to partner with us and adopt a future of a child in El Salvador. $10 a future, $10 a child, not just for an immediate gift, but for a generational impact and change. We're so excited. We can't wait to see what you all do. We can't wait to partner with you in El Salvador and see the lives and the futures, the generations that will be changed because you adopted a future. God bless.
Well, coming up is our second presenter of the night, and our second presenter is Kim Batson. Kim holds a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology. She works in the mental health field as a program manager for the Mental Health Cooperative in Dixon, Tennessee. She has spent the last 16 years there focusing on leadership development. Kim is the Children's Ministry Director for the Church of God of Prophecy in Tennessee, and she's a member of the International Children's Ministries Advisory Team. She sees the importance of mentoring and developing leaders and has a passion for people. Kim has dedicated her life to the ministry of children and to developing leaders, and she's been a great asset to our training team, traveled much of the world with us. So Kim's coming tonight to talk to us about how to keep our ministry spaces safe places for the kids that we serve. Enjoy this presentation. Welcome, Kim.
Good evening. I hope you are staying well during this very interesting time. It is my honor to participate in the webinar tonight with such a wonderful cast of guests. I also wanted to show appreciation to Shaun McKinley and his amazing team and how they have provided us with excellent resources and information to navigate the pandemic of 2020. His forward leadership and support to the regional directors and local children's ministers has allowed us to ensure to provide safe ministry to our children. You guys are a wonderful resource to us, and we love and appreciate you. I wanted to share with you tonight on some things that we need to put in place to ensure we're providing a safe ministry environment for our children. If you have a new family who visits your local church this week, they are looking to answer 3 questions. Number 1, can I make a friend here? Number 2, can I be used in ministry? And number 3, and probably most important to what we'll be talking about tonight, is there an effective children's ministry? With the COVID-19 and the pandemic, it has been more important than ever before to ensure that we are providing a safe, sanitized, and secure environment for our children. It is important that our parents have trust and faith in what we have put in place to allow their children to enter our ministries. Recently, I took a trip to the Grand Canyon. My niece, this was her senior year, and this was actually her senior trip. As we boarded the Southwest plane, I was very impressed with their forward messaging of safety. They had not sold out the middle seat. They kept it vacant to ensure social distancing practices could be in place. And as we got onto the plane, actual Southwest employees had antibacterial wipes, and they were wiping down every surface. I quickly became comfortable and knew that I had made the right choice. On who was going to safely meet my travel needs. And we must have the same forward messaging in regards to our safety and our protocols that we have in place. Our parents must witness us putting into action the safety protocols that we have put in place for our children. Tonight, as we do our webinar, we're going to focus on preparation, consistency, supervision, and follow-through to ensure that our parents and our children know that safety is at the forefront of our minds. So with preparation, it's important to have in writing our best practices and policies and procedures. This would allow that when a new family comes to visit, that we would be able to provide those policies and procedures to parents to show that this is what our volunteers have been trained in and that this is what they can expect from our ministry. With everything that's going on, we need to ensure there is a policy with children's ministry, basic and wellness policy. We need to be very clear on what is our policy on children and what symptoms they've had within the last 24 hours. If they've had a fever over 100.4 degrees, what would happen if the child become ill while they were in our ministry? On the CGP Kids website, you can actually find a children's ministry basic health and wellness policy. Now, I am a person that believes there is no need to reinvent the wheel. This policy has already been developed and is a great resource for you to pull off the website after tonight's webinar and make any changes that you would like to meet the individualized needs of your ministry. Along with that, I hope you will look also for the Children's Ministry Cleaning Checklist, where it allows you to know the things that need to be done weekly to sanitize your children's ministry area, things that need to be done monthly, and then quarterly. It also allows that the person that is responsible for that cleaning to initial that it has been done so that you have in your records proof of what has been done to ensure that we are keeping a sanitized children's ministry environment. It's also very important that we have a structured and a consistent sign-in and sign-out policy. The number one kidnapper of children is the non-custodial parent. And as you know, more and more, we are having different custody battles, and it's very important to have an information sheet on each of your children to know who has custody and who has permission to pick up the child. This can be done through various computer programs that are out there, but also can be done with pen and paper, where you sign in the children when they are dropped off, and then you sign out who has picked up the child. This allows you to know that while the children are in your care, that you are 100% responsible for their safety and well-being. Once they are signed out, then that responsibility falls to who they have been released to. It's also important for our families to know what would we do in case of an emergency. What if there was a fire in the church? Where would the children be taken to? Where could they go and find and pick up their children? Where are the safe places that if there's a tornado, where should the children be taken? And any medical and allergy information needs to be shared on the information sheet, but also visualized in the classroom. If we have substitute teachers who maybe not be aware of the children in our ministry, it's important that any allergies be posted within the classroom in red marker so that everyone is aware of the allergies. We cannot depend on the child to share that they have an allergy. We do not want to put the responsibility on the child. We, as the volunteers, need to take that responsibility. Another area that we're needing to be proactive in these days and prepare for is a word that I don't think I heard before 2020, and that is with social distancing. It's very important that we are able to keep our children 6 feet apart. This can be a challenge at times for our children to understand that they can't hug and that they can't be together like they have been together before. Our children at times do not have the ability to inwardly set boundaries. So it is our job as children's ministers to ensure that the environment is able to set an appropriate boundary for them. Now, this can be done in a variety of creative ways. I've seen ministries that have done hula hoops on the floor where the child is told, this is your space, please do not leave this space while you're in the ministry. Others have used carpet squares, yoga mats. Others have used blow-up pools. There really is no right or wrong way. The key is that the children know this is my space that I need to remain in during the ministry time. It can also be done by just separating the chairs out 6 feet apart, or putting each family at a different table where they know this is my space and that I need to stay separated and social distance from my peers. Now, I am a big proponent in children's ministry of ensuring that we're engaging our children with many activities. That's important still, but we have to do that in a very different way. Any supplies that your children may need, either markers, crayons, pencils, pens, they need their own supplies. We do not need a group supply of those things where many children are using the same supplies. So it's important to ensure that each child has their own supplies to be able to participate in the activity at their station to ensure that social distancing can stay in place. Another area that we can be proactive is to ensure that each volunteer has their own file. It's a file to keep paperwork, to show what the church has done to ensure that there's process is in place to keep children safe. In this file, I recommend that you would create a form for the volunteer to sign to state that they have read the Child Youth Workers Protection Policy of the Church of God of Prophecy, that they have read it and that they agree to follow the Child Workers Protection Policy. I would also put in there a copy of any of the policies and procedures that you have in children's ministry, any best practices that you have developed, and have the volunteer to sign that they agree to follow those to ensure consistency. You also want a pastoral endorsement to show that this person has been endorsed by their local pastor to volunteer in children's ministry. You'd also want in that file to show a past background check to show that you have been proactive to check the background of the volunteer to ensure that there are no concerning things such as any sort of abuse or violence toward children or any violence toward adults. Those are the charges that would prohibit a person from volunteering in children's ministry. Another area that I think is important to document is any trainings that your team has participated in or your volunteer has participated in. So I think it's important that if you have your team together tonight and you are participating in this training tonight, that you would have a form in there that stated on this date you participated in a safe ministry training. And that shows that what your church has done to invest in their volunteers to create a safe working environment for the children. It is much better to be proactive than reactive. It is very important that you would be able to show that you have proactively been doing everything in your power to keep the children safe. If you came into a situation where there was a legal charge of any kind, these things are the things that you could take to court to show that you had been proactive to do everything in your power to keep the children safe in the environment that they are in your local church. Another area that's important is consistency. We must ensure that all volunteers are consistent in following the policies and procedures that we have put in place. Actually, lack of consistency causes a lot of confusion for the children, but also could open yourself up to legal situations if things arise. So as a children's ministry leader, it is important that you are holding your volunteers accountable to the protocols and the policies that you put in place. A way to do that is to have quarterly meetings where you're talking about policies and procedures, you're giving updates on anything that needs to be focused on, you're focusing on anything that maybe y'all need to put some extra focus, but this is a time to bring your children's ministry leaders together and talk about policies and procedures. I also recommend quarterly trainings. That way that you're equipping and you're enhancing the skills of your children's ministry leaders to ensure that they're able to provide effective ministry. We have a variety of ways to do trainings these days. Webinars, podcasts, in-person trainings. Your regional children's ministry leader is a great resource for you to bring in trainings. They can do trainings for you at your local church, or they can bring others in to train. But we have a variety of resources at our disposal through podcasts, webinars. When you do trainings with your local church, I recommend that you view those together. I think it's important as a team that you view the material, and then you have the opportunity afterwards to talk about how the material that was presented tonight relates directly to your church. What are the areas you're already doing well? What are some areas that might need a little bit more focus, and how that you can bring those things together to ensure that consistency is done. Another area that will ensure consistency is to have an evaluation process for your children's ministry. I recommend that every 6 months you do a survey and have your church leadership to complete the survey. I recommend having the parents of your children to complete the survey, and most importantly, the children. If you really want to know how you're doing in your ministry, the children will be the ones to tell you exactly what they're liking, what they're not liking. A great way to create this survey is through SurveyMonkey. You have the ability to set your questions. I recommend, instead of a rating scale, to use open-ended questions such as, please share the top 3 strengths of our children's ministry. Please share 3 areas that you think we need to focus on for improvement. Please share what you feel like the next step for our ministry should be. what are the spiritual gifts that we would need in order to achieve that next step for our ministry. And then you can take this information from these evaluations, and that will allow you to create a training strategy. It will allow you to say, you know what, the surveys have shown we need to put more focus on evangelism, and we need to put more focus on leading a child to Christ. So that would then focus that your next training need for your children's ministry team would be on how to lead a child to Christ. Many times, I think at times we are not as strategic and we're not as focused on how we coordinate and plan our trainings, and we want to make sure that trainings are meeting a specific need for our children's ministry teams, and also will allow us to ensure that we're making the most of our limited resources that we have at our disposal. But trainings and meetings and then evaluations are a great way to ensure that you are providing consistent ministry to your children. The next thing we want to look at in regards to safe ministry is adequate supervision for our children. The number one abuser of children are other children. Actually, other children who have been abused at times will react and act that out onto other children. For some children who are being abused, they are being told that this is the way we show love. So when they make a new friend, they want to show love to that friend. And so it's very important that we have adequate supervision and that the children are not ever left alone and unsupervised. At the Church of God of Prophecy, through the Child Workers Protection Policy, we have a 2-adult rule for the classroom, which means that there must be 2 adults at all times in the classroom. Now, you may have one teacher, but you may have another person in your local church that would be willing to step up to be the second person. This person would help with supervision. They may help with setting up some activities, but this will allow you to have 2 adults in the classroom and adequate supervision. Another place that we need to make sure that we have appropriate protocols in place is when our children use the bathroom. We need to have bathroom protocols in place where we have an adult go in and make sure there's no one in the bathroom, and then we allow one child at a time to go in the bathroom and out. This way we ensure that they are not in there with any other adult, but also make sure that they're not in there with other kids. So we want to have these protocols in place to ensure that our children are safe. The key to safe ministry really is being proactive, consistent, having adequate supervision, and really following through with what we are saying we're going to do. When we have a parent who comes in and we're able to provide them with these protocols, that will do the same thing it did for me when I got on that airplane. It will provide a peace. It will provide a trust that their child is safe. However, if we do not follow through with those protocols, then we will undo what we have worked so hard to create. So it's very, very important that whatever protocols and policies and procedures that we have in place, that we're being very consistent to follow through with what we say we're going to do. So, how are you doing? What would that family leave feeling? Are they going to be able to say that you have an effective children's ministry? Are they going to feel like you have provided an environment where their child will be safe and secure? Do you have policies and procedures and best practice? Do you have training files for each of your volunteers? Do you have a specific training strategy in place? Are you providing adequate supervision for your kids? The key is to answer those questions honestly and say, where do we begin? Probably most churches are not going to be able to check off all the boxes, and that's okay. But the key is that as you're watching this tonight and as you're making notes, and as I hope that you're even watching this with your children's ministry team, that you're coming together after this webinar to say, I want to provide the safest environment for my children. God bless you. I hope I can be a resource to you anytime. My email address is kbatson77@comcast.net. If you have further questions after this webinar, I would be happy to answer them. God bless you.
Welcome back, and that was another great presentation from Kim. We love to hear from her, and she knows what she's talking about.
Absolutely, she does.
Kim is not only the State Director of Children's Ministries, but actually she now does camping ministry in Tennessee, so she does a lot of trainings about safety procedures, protocols, and so we're grateful to hear from her tonight. So I guess, Joy, as I was listening to that, I had one question that instantly came to mind. Children's ministry right now is very different than what it was a year ago because of the pandemic that's going on. Really all around the world it's changed for us. So as you kind of think about policies and procedures in children's ministry, what are some things that have changed for you, or some differences, adjustments you've had to make in your ministry?
Yeah, absolutely. Even earlier this year, before COVID really was huge, just as it was kind of starting in North America, we started implementing wellness policies and posting them. I mean, we had them, but they weren't posted. I started sharing them on social media. We have to clean now our children's area, make sure it's cleaned twice a week. Now, instead of just once a week, we do temperature checks of all of the children and volunteers when they arrive. And also in our large group room, we have had to space out all of the chairs, which actually is a good idea, and I wondered why we had never done that before, because we had a lot less discipline issues with the chairs spread apart. But just several things like that. We've eliminated a lot of like the Legos and the toys that have to be cleaned all of the time. So it's definitely different, but we're glad to be back.
Yeah, well, we're all kind of making adjustments, most of them very significant, and a few minor adjustments as well. But I think that in this present moment that we are in, one of the things that I always fall back on the rule about policies and procedures, that if they're not written, they're not really policies and procedures. So as we're going through shifts and changes, and Kim brought this out in her presentation, I think we need to make sure we're writing all of these policies down and sharing them with our pastor, with our parents, and with our volunteers, so that we're all kind of on the same page.
Yeah, and we, as you know, we have the child, youth, and worker protection policy. So how does your church, because I know they do a training every year on it, how do they implement that?
Sure. And Kim mentioned several of these resources. They are on the Children's Ministry website where you can access them. The wellness policy there. There's a COVID, sort of reopening phase plan if you've not reopened your children's ministry yet. But the child, youth, and worker protection policy has been around for a while in the Church of God of Prophecy. And so in our church, what we do is first we make sure everybody has a printed copy of it. Now, it's a large document, but it is helpful for everyone to have one that they can hold. And we actually ask everyone to sign that they have read it and that they will comply with the policies that are inside that policy book. But we actually do a yearly event where we bring in all of our volunteers, all of them. Not just the children's ministry volunteers, but everyone, those that work with young people and even adults. We all come together. We usually have a lunch, and then we just go through the policy manual. Sometimes we'll even break out the children's ministry people one area, the youth ministry, and the adults to speak to some of the policies specific to them. But I think it is important that you have some type of at least annual review of that policy. It not only is for the safety of your children, but also it protects your own church. If heaven forbid, there be some issue that you face a lawsuit or a challenge of some sort. So it definitely is a resource. If you've not accessed it, please download it and make sure that your volunteers all read it. And like I said, it's important that they sign. I believe it's actually in the policy manual. There's a form there that they can sign that they've read it and return it to you.
Absolutely, and that's always a great time to do a refresher on your background checks annually
as
well.
We do as well. Yeah. So our church does keep a folder of every volunteer. It's got those forms in there. What training have they done? Have they read through the policy manual? So that's really important.
Yeah. Now, sometimes you might have people or parents who may not want to comply with policies. So, we have all probably been in those situations where it's very awkward. So what do you recommend to do in those situations?
Sure. Well, again, as we talk about things are changing so rapidly, a lot of our policies now are not just good ideas, but they're essential and they're necessary. And, there are some aspects of some of the procedures we put into place that people may not agree with. I can think a couple of years ago, I had a rule, just for the safety of the kids, that a parent or guardian, whoever dropped the child off, had to come pick the child up after children's ministry was over. We sometimes had 40 or 50 kids in one room, and so it was really important that whoever brought them would be the person that picked them up. A lot of my parents didn't like that. They wanted to be able to send a sibling to come pick their kid up. But if you have, again, as I said, if you have a policy that is written, and it's a policy that your pastor in particular has seen and he approves of, or if you have a board in your church, whatever the proper procedure is, then it's a policy that you need to reinforce. And so, I am of the opinion, if you have a written policy, it's been communicated, and someone doesn't want to comply, that it may be that their child cannot participate in whatever that is at the moment. And so you want to handle that very carefully. You want to be sure that your pastor is a part of that conversation. But again, I think in the critical time that we're in right now, it's really important that everyone comply with these procedures. There are several I don't like right now.
Yeah.
But I am doing it because it's the thing I've been asked to do. And also I think it's a way that we can love our neighbor and show our support for those around us. So that's my answer.
Great. That's perfect.
Up next, we will hear from Derek and Jennifer Roark, who we've invited to share their favorite things. Derek and Jennifer have a passion and calling for teaching, ministering, and growing the kingdom of God. They answered their calling to full-time children's ministry beginning in 2015 in North Carolina. Being Kentucky natives, they returned to Bowling Green, Kentucky, where they currently serve as Kentucky's state children's ministry directors, as well as children's pastors in their local church. Derek and Jennifer have 2 young children, Harper and Hadley, who have inspired them to dig deeper to find creative ways to reach every child to share the message of God's love. Immediately following Derek and Jennifer, we will hear from our final presenter this evening, Ryan Green. Ryan is the husband to an amazing woman and father to 4 incredible kids. Previously, Ryan has served as a children's pastor for 14 years, as well as the state director of children's ministries in South Carolina. He and his family now reside in Oklahoma, where they are active in various ministries. Ryan loves to serve however he can and is a member of the International Children's Ministries Advisory Team. Enjoy these presentations, and Joy and I will be back at the conclusion.
Oh, I think this is everything. I just got so many favorites. I don't know what to share.
I can't read any of this. I think this is the Spanish edition.
Hey guys, it's Derek and
Jennifer
Roark, and we're from Bowling Green, Kentucky. We are the state children's directors for the state of Kentucky, and we go to church south of here in Franklin, where we attend Crosswinds Church, and we are in charge of the children's ministry and the worship ministry. So Shaun asked us to share a few of our favorite things. So we have a box full. We're going to try to get through these as fast as we can. With our church, it's kind of a medium size. I'll give you a brief background. So our church, we probably run about 75 on a good Sunday before the coronavirus. You know how that goes. But our Sundays and our Wednesdays are much different from each other. Our Sundays are more of what traditionally we would say our church kids, which are the children of our congregation that attend regularly. But we live close to the government. Our church is situated close to the government housing, so Wednesday nights is really an outreach. So we bring kids in, we feed them a meal, and then we take them to classes. So the kids that we have Wednesday night and their background and their understanding of Christianity is on a way different scale than the kids that we have on Sunday. So that being said, let's start showing you some of the goodies we got. All right, you
want to do this one?
Yeah,
okay.
I'll go through here.
This one's called What If. This is one of our favorites. It is by Tony and Daniel Miles. We actually started using this as a family devotion. just with our family. We have 2 kids. We have a son who is 11 and a daughter who is 5. And it, in my opinion, is very appropriate for both of them. You can kind of adjust to age levels. And then we started using it sort of as a Wednesday night kind of an opener. Each lesson it goes through, it has a little question that is sort of an icebreaker. Some of the questions are funny, but it all wraps into some kind of a Bible lesson, and then it opens for discussion at the end. So this is very helpful. My kids love it. We do it daily for our family devotion. So it's a good one. We got it from Lifeway right before they shut down here. You can still order it from their website, but it's probably available on Amazon as well.
Yeah, so there are 365 devotionals in here. It's actually a yearly devotional. So, about our Wednesday night kids, very quickly when we started doing this outreach and the kids were coming in, we were talking to them about basic Christian things, which we assume that everybody has heard of. So we, threw out the name Jesus, and they're like, yeah, I've heard of Jesus. So at one point, very early on, I said something about Noah, and they're like, who's Noah? What's an ark? What is this? So we realized very quickly they knew very little about the Bible. And why should they? Because, they've not been raised in church. And so we took it, very quickly. We wanted to find something very solid just to introduce basic Bible truths and basic Bible stories. And this was really our gem for a couple of years. It has 52 lessons in it, and it goes from Old Testament to New Testament. This is the Gospel Project, and I always love their stuff because every lesson always somehow takes the story and wraps it back around into the plan of salvation through Jesus Christ. But what this would do, even if we're talking about the story of Noah, there's a story that goes with it. This story is not always about Noah. It's about a person that maybe went through a similar struggle that Noah did. So that would relate it back to the kid. And then you could always flip over, and every lesson has a QR code. So you can scan that with your phone. I actually scanned them and then downloaded them on the computer so I could play them on our projector screen. But if you don't have that, if you have a small group, they can gather around, you can scan this, and then it tells the actual Bible lesson. And at the end of that, it wraps it back to the plan of salvation too. There's always a Christ connection, there's questions to ask, and a prayer that you can lead them through. But this was a great way to kind of just give a guidance into those traditional Bible stories that we grew up with, Daniel in the lion's den, Jonah in the well, these things that they'd never heard of. This was great to get them started in that and really pique their interest. And I will say we did do the lesson of Moses, and we found some very cool resources on Answers in Genesis. We did a study about the Red Sea and how some divers had actually went down into the Red Sea and they found coral that had grown over chariots and skeletons and horse skeletons, and there was pictures of it like evidence. And for these kids, where this stuff might seem really abstract, even as Christians, as believers, it was nice to see that. But it was something that kind of solidified, hey, why else would that be in the middle of the Red Sea, unless this had actually happened? So that's the 52-week Bible story devotional. It runs about $20, and it is well worth it.
Okay.
Pushing our 5 minutes.
Yes, we are. Okay, this one is another one of our favorites. It's by Anne-Marie Gosnell. It's called Walk This Way. She actually has several other publishings that you can find on a website that is super cool. It's called futureflyingsaucers.com. And it has all kinds of extra stuff that goes with each of these lessons on there. There's printouts that you can give the kids and all kinds of extra stuff that she's put on there. So this one's called Ethics and Sanctifications Lessons for Kids. So this one was very helpful. Like Derek said, we have a lot of new believers, especially on Wednesday nights. A lot of kids that has been previously unchurched, and so we had a lot of awesome questions that are super important, like why is cursing wrong? Why is lying wrong? Basic Bible truths in here that were super helpful that we use on our Wednesday nights. It all has a lesson. The materials that you use for each of the lessons are common materials you probably have in your home, so that's really helpful for all of us who don't like to go to the store every week and buy a huge material list. So it's common stuff stuff that you've got probably laying around at home. It has an object lesson. It has life applications. And yes, I think there's 20 lessons in each book.
Mm-hmm. She has.
And so this is what, $20?
I think it runs $20.
Around $20 on her.
And I know she has 2 or 3.
And we found this actually, if you know who Ryan Frank is, 5 years ago, I believe, at ICM. We were honored to have him come and we got to meet him and stuff. But anyway, when we were searching for curriculum, he had reviewed this and gave it 5 stars.
Highly recommended.
We like
so you know
it
this
too.
is good stuff. Okay, that being said, we're trying to show you a lot of good stuff because I know a lot of us are very tight on budget. So you want really good curriculum that can cover a lot of ages, a lot of material for a good price. These are a couple of those. These are oldies but goodies. Focus on the families. They're called heritage builders. They're actually called like devotions for your living room. You can search for these once you find one on Amazon. I don't even know if these are published anymore, but you can get them for about $3 to $5 a piece. That being said, these are similar, probably more of a contemporary thing. There's about 8 of these series now, but they're all like 13 very big promises, 13 very cool stories, 13 very bad days. These run about $10 a piece. So the cool thing about these is that it will also go into a specific Bible story, but everything that you do to learn about the story is interactive. These are especially designed for your materials to be things that you can just grab around at home and take to church. So once again, you don't have to go buy a bunch of things. Hopefully most of these you can find. Also, there is like a teaching activity which has an option A and B. There's a reflection activity which has an option A and B. So you can pick and choose your options based on what you have at home. You can also pick and choose your options on just what you think will work. This is good for classes where you might have younger to older kids because it covers a variety of ages. And then it's very easy for you to maybe choose an activity that's geared towards the older kids, and maybe the younger kids can root for them when they're doing more of their activity. And then you can choose an activity that's geared towards the youngers and bringing some of your older kids to assist the younger kids with what they need to do. And we've had a lot of good success with this. A very good material. You can make it as long or short as you want by using more or less of the options. So it's very flexible. So we go to that a lot. And that's similar, like I said, this is older, the focus on the family, heritage builders. But once again, these are actually devotions that are designed for you to have an interactive devotion in your living room at home with things around the house. Very similar to this. Very easy for you to take this and also integrate it into a full Sunday school for an hour. Or, if you have a short thing for 15, 20 minutes, pick out some options and you can still get quite a bit of that covered and reflection on that. So those are our budget-friendly, very good curriculums that we go to.
Websites.
Kidmin Online Yard Sale. That's a Facebook page. Kidmin Online Yard Sale. So my very favorite curriculum, and it is expensive unless you're like me and you can budget shop. So this is Big Curriculum by Hillsong. I love this. So there's so much material in it and everything that goes with it. There's always, a binder full just for this that has physical lessons. This will have prayers. It will have object lessons. It will have games. It just has everything. But what also goes with it is the DVD series. For instance, like Tell the World, you go in there and each of these probably have about 13 lessons, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's very easy for me to take one of these lessons and do it on both a Sunday and a Wednesday. There's a DVD lesson with the big crew. You'll get to know them and love them. They'll be getting in crazy situations and discover this Bible truth. There's worship on here that has lyrics, and you can look up the motions for the songs that the kids want to get into that. There's a memory verse. There's music for prayer time. There's music for game time. This is expensive. If you bought this brand new, usually a new set, I think probably runs between $150 to $200 just for one. So if you have a big budget, that's nice. We don't always have that. So I did some searching and I was able to come across this on eBay. And I think I ended up getting it for like $250 for all of it, which was seems like a lot, but to have something really interactive, and we had done some fundraising, I've worked on this as long as also using these things, and it's lasted us well beyond a year. We're still working on just the first season, and I found a good deal on season 2. So,
yeah. And we've taken some of this, incorporated it into worship, because we also are worship leaders in our church. What we do is all the kids stay in service on Sunday morning until prayer, right before the message is preached. Then we dismiss to the youth center, which is in a separate building. And so our kids get to be a part of the whole service as well every single Sunday. So we've taken some of this stuff that we've done from Hillsong, and we've taught our kids the motions. And every first Sunday of the month, we have Family Sunday. It's where we have the kids come on stage and help us with worship. And so we've incorporated some of the worship from Hillsong into our first Sunday services for them as well. So,
right. And the kids don't always do worship in our class because, like she said, we always have family worship and then disperse. Wow, I know we went beyond 5 minutes. I'm sorry.
That's it.
The headquarters, have fun editing this down if you need to. I will say one more website I wrote down. A lot of us have been going through quarantine. Some of you might still be doing some videos that you post and share with if your church isn't meeting. I did find on YouTube, if you search for Devotional for Kids Quarantine Edition, there is, and it's actually the Apostolic Sunday School, but you can convert a lot of that, but there's this guy that has 72 videos, and he does very good object lessons, and I used a lot of his object lessons, even if I changed the content around it that I needed to, but that's a great reference for some really good object lessons that I've tried to do in some of our quarantine videos ourselves. So, anything else?
That's it.
All right. Good luck out there. I hope if any of y'all have any questions, find us on Facebook. Ask us more about something specific. If we didn't cover it, we sure tried. All right. Love you guys. Take care.
Bye.
Hey, how's it going? It's great to be with you guys tonight. That's right, I am coming from the kitchen, as you can tell. Yep, got our menu up there for the week. Woohoo, exciting. But no, seriously, excited to be with you guys tonight. Been a little different for me lately. I've been in a new season of life and doing things a little differently. For 13 years, I was in full-time ministry, serving every week, every service, here and there, and just doing that. And then this last year, kind of taking a little bit of a break, not like from church or anything, but serving in a volunteer capacity, and in fact serving as a small group leader for preschool. And so it's been pretty cool. Been very different though, because for probably 15 to 17 years, I was in charge of ministry, whether it was camp or conference or local church ministry. And now I'm serving as a volunteer, and it's a different perspective. And something I really needed was just to be reminded of what it's like to be a volunteer again. And some of these things that I thought was important and kind of knew was important as a leader, I kind of let go, and I was like, oh yeah, we'll get to it. Oh yeah, we'll do it. And now as a volunteer, I'm like, man, I wish they'd just communicate with me. I wish they just let me know what they expected. I just wish I knew what I was supposed to do. And that's where policies and procedures come in. They kind of help us out with that aspect of it. And whether it's volunteers and taking care of them and making sure that we've got stuff set up and communicate with them that they know and they can do and be a part of and kind of know what we expect. Or if it's something like with safety and that we're taking care of classes, and we can communicate this to parents so that they know what's going on and they know that we're taking care of their kids and keeping their kids safe. What there's really kind of I'm seeing is how the other day I was praying about, what am I going to tell you guys about policies and procedures? What is it that I need to communicate about this terribly exciting subject we're sharing tonight, in these details? And the Holy Spirit kind of dropped this in my spirit about how policies and procedures are like roads. They kind of give it structure of from where you want to go, how to get there. Like
we need to make a plan for ministry. We need to know what it is we're going to do, and then they help us kind of get there and see what that looks like. And so what I was kind of thinking about was actually when I was in South Carolina, in the Charleston area, if I wanted to go to the beach, I had to kind of like figure out, okay, I'm going to the beach, but like which one am I going to? And so in ministries, they're like, what do we want this to look like? We know we want to teach kids, we want them to grow, and we want to see these things happen, but like, what do we really want it to look like? Where do we really want to be? And so you have to kind of determine those things and make a plan for that. Kind of like I had to plan which beach I was. I going to Folly? Was I going to Isle of Palms? What was I looking for that day? And what did I want it to be like? And so that experience. And when we determine those things, we can then begin to make a plan with our policies and procedures that help us accomplish that vision or help us get to that and kind of fill out that picture of what it looks like. And so as we're doing this and as we're making a plan, I want to encourage you, yes, absolutely. We want to make sure we pray. Like, that's what we do, right? Like, we pray, we talk to God, we ask Him, Father, what is it you want us to do? And then we do it. And so definitely pray. Also, get some help on this. Like, even though I kind of knew how to get to the beach, I would get directions. I'd pull it up on, my phone, and I'd be like, doo, 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 doo. And whether it was Waze or Maps or Scout or, whatever driving map app, GPS thing I was using that day, I would type in the address and then it would give me a route to get there. And so I would have to kind of look at that and see, what does the route say and which one do I want to follow? Okay, I'm going to pick this route. Like even just going to Folly Beach. It would give me a couple different ways I could get there to get to the same end results, and I'd find the one that I thought was best for what it is I wanted to do. Okay, first off, was it Friday night? Because it happened one time where we were going down to Folly for like a prayer time with the staff and pastors, and we had to determine, are we going to go like downtown, or are we going to take kind of a way around? Which route are we going to go? And then like in going that way, while I know where I'm going, it's kind of helpful to have that GPS to remind me of what steps I need to take. Something else that was helpful was like talking to other people. Like if we were going somewhere, I might ask my wife, hey, what's it like going to Charleston? Because she was driving, to work that was right there by it, and she would be taking some of those passes. She could tell me if there's construction coming up, or is there something else going on? Was there a wreck on the way home? And so like when we're making a plan and we're setting up policies and procedures, we need to kind of like map out where we want to go and then get some input from some other people. Like bring some people in that you trust, that you believe can help out and give insight into this. And they may not actually be involved in children's ministry. That's one thing that's pretty cool is talking to people that aren't involved, because they can give you that different perspective, but you also want to make sure that you're talking to people that are actually there and doing it. That's one thing, like even at work now, I think it's funny how engineers have like, no, this is what you do. You do this, 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 and this, and that's going to work. And I'm like, no, I'm here, and that doesn't work that way. And so talk to the people that are actually doing it. They'll give you insight. And so like when we were heading to Charleston, I'd ask Ruth Ann, hey, what do you think about this? And she could tell me, oh, no, it's awful. Or there'd be some mornings when I was taking kids to school, I could look down the highway as we crossed over, and I'd be like, text Ruth Ann, hey, do not take the highway today. You need to go a different route. Because I had seen something that she hadn't seen yet, and I was able to help her plan and choose a route that was going to help her get where it is she wanted to go. And so when it comes to policies and procedures, whichever area of ministry it is that you're doing this, or even aspect, I love seeing this happen for volunteers to kind of help remember things that whether it's getting a new volunteer onboarded where you're getting them into ministry, like you want to talk to them, so you want to have procedures for that. You want to, do the background checks and reference checks and all those things. Having that outline helps you kind of walk through step by step and seeing where you're going. Safety procedures, not even look at safety as like, we kind of actually need to know how to evacuate a building if you're even fortunate enough to be meeting in a building. I'm sure a lot of us are at this point in time, but some of you may not be yet. But policies and procedures and safety there, like, hey, yeah, it's a little bit different now, isn't it? Who knew that face masks and all that kind of stuff would be part of safety? Most of us aren't doing that in kids' church, but you got to think through these different things of what is it relevant to where you are and what's going on where you're at. And so get input of those around you. I think it's real interesting how I saw and heard how some people were doing things like teachers, and this isn't to pick on teachers, but like during the summer, they were doing things one way. And they were careful, I'm sure, but as soon as school started or even the week or two leading up to it, like you saw them with masks, they were careful because they knew they could not get sick because that meant they would be out of school for like 2 weeks. And so like they had to do things differently. And so maybe you talk to some teachers, just get some input from them on how some of these things should roll when it comes to safety or other things like that. But talk to people, get input from others that you trust to be able to help you out with this. And so the first thing you do is you make that plan. Now, in making that plan, you do want to write it down. Make sure it's recorded, not just like, oh, I got it right here. Well, when I'm doing, going somewhere and the directions, I'm like, oh, yeah, I got it. And then I don't just turn off my phone unless it's someplace I've been over and over again. I generally like to just keep it, even if it's places that I have been, just so it's a little reminder that I don't forget. And so the second thing I'll say about this is be consistent. So number one, make a plan. Number two, be consistent with your policies and procedures. So like follow the directions, right? I mean, like it would be kind of ridiculous for me to get directions and then like, I don't need those, and then just throw them out. I need to follow these directions. And so then I can go ahead and make sure I'm still on track and heading the right way. Now, it is good to make sure that those directions are getting you the right way. A lot of these GPS apps have gotten a lot better than they were. I can remember one time years ago, using my BlackBerry. And I was on my way to find a funeral home, a funeral I had to go to attend, not, like lead or serve or anything like that, but ministering to a family that was serving in children's ministry. And it was, one of their family members. And I'm following the map. And as I drive, I kind of look and I'm like, hey, that looks like a funeral home. And I keep on going, I follow the directions, and it drops me off like I think at the dude's house, like the guy's house that runs it or something like that, because it wound up being a dead end with next to a railroad track and a house. And I was like, yeah, this isn't it. So I turned back around, kind of followed my way back through town, and then found, hey, here's the funeral home. Yep, this is it, slipped in just in time, all that kind of stuff. So make sure your directions actually are getting you where you want to go. But then follow them. Like, I mean, if you know they're good, follow the directions. Be consistent in this. If I decide halfway through, you know what, I don't want to do this, I want to go some other way, it may not help me get where I'm going as quickly as I had already set up to be. And one thing that I really like is I don't always like how it tells me all the time, like in 2 miles, exit right. And 1 mile, exit right. But I do like, especially when it's like 250 yards, in 250 yards, make a right turn. It's like, oh, this is getting ready to happen. Oh, this is coming up. I need to, know this is what's happening. And so when it comes to policies and procedures, make sure you're communicating those regularly. Be consistent in that, in communicating this with your volunteers. Now, make sure it's relevant to what's going on right at that time. Like, my driving app isn't going to tell me 15 steps ahead. It's going to tell me what I need to know right now. And then after that, what's coming up next. And then as I get closer to it, it'll remind me again, hey, don't forget, you're going to be turning left here. And so make sure that you communicate that regularly in multiple different ways. One is that having it written, having it emailed out. Some things like are seasonal, and so you'll want to remind people of policies or procedures. Maybe it's reminding people of a summer dress code, right? Something that we've done a few times just because it starts to get warmer. People might get a little bit more comfortable than maybe your church is okay with in volunteer serving in ministry in specific roles. And so you might want to communicate that seasonally. If it's something that's happening regularly, that happens in each service, then you need to remind them, hey, I know we just started this, so I just want to remind you, make sure we do this. We sanitize at the end of each service, that we're wiping everything down. And that might be something you just do in a meeting each week. But make sure you communicate in multiple ways. Send out the written thing. Put it in their hand. Shoot them a text. Maybe in a meeting that you have quarterly or monthly, you kind of hit a few things that you just want to remind them of. Hey, don't forget about this. But make sure you're communicating these. Make sure that they know what to expect here. And so communicate regularly. And one thing that I can tell you, I wasn't always good at was being consistent in this stuff. Like sometimes I would have these great ideas, like we're going to have staff meeting 15 minutes, or like you had to be in your classroom 15 minutes before service, but 20, 25 minutes before service, we're going to go ahead and have this meeting. We're going to pray. And I had good intentions, but I wasn't consistent in following through. And I didn't always stick with what it was I was wanting to do. And that was actually a really good thing of meeting with them just for a moment, just to pray and focus and center in. Maybe we weren't always excited about getting there, the extra 10, 15 minutes early. But I can tell you now, like, I'm expecting when I get to church that we're having that meeting. And I'm expecting that the time I took to get there early is going to be worth it when I get there. The leader's going to be prepared and ready to just go ahead. And even if it's just share a couple things, hey, this is what we got going on today. Don't forget about this and this in the lesson. And let's just pray. I'm expecting that to happen. So as a leader, make sure you're consistent, sticking with it week in and week out. And so for those of you that I failed in that, I apologize right now. I'm sorry. I missed it, and I get it now. And just want to let you know, I see that, and I see the pain that you went through then. And I apologize for that greatly. So kind of like one thing I love is we need to make sure that we're the example and not the exception when it comes to these policies. That as a leader, you're the one that's setting the example and consistent with this time in and time out so that they know what to expect and then they follow that. One of the most annoying things is that saying, do as I say, not as I do. Like, really? What? No, that doesn't even make sense. No, be the example, not the exception. And so the third thing, so let's see, we want to make a plan, we want to be consistent, and the third thing is evaluate effectiveness. You want to go ahead and take a look at, is the policies and procedures that we have set up, are they effective? Some of these you're going to evaluate immediately. Like if I'm traveling somewhere and I'm following the directions, I may see that, hey, wait a minute, this isn't going to work. I see a wreck up in front of me, or I see lots of traffic, and I know there's another route that will actually be more effective than following this one. Or maybe it's one of those where you're driving along and all of a sudden you get to the detour sign and you're like, I don't know how to get there without going this way. And so you might have to change paths. This may be something that comes up on a Sunday morning or Wednesday night, where this is how we're doing. We set up this policy or this procedure for registration and checking kids in, and then bam, your computer's down or your check-in's gone, or the person that's doing it isn't going to be there because they were in a wreck or something, and you're having to change just right there on the fly. And maybe it wasn't something that you wanted to do differently, but you're evaluating right now, hey, wait a minute, I don't have a choice. I have to do this differently. And so then afterwards you can step back and think, okay, what can we do whenever these emergencies or things come up to evaluate the effectiveness of your policies and procedures, when things change, when things happen. And not just you evaluating them, but once again, getting input from other people. making sure that, hey, how did this go? That's one of the things that I appreciate when our preschool director checks in with us and says, hey, how did service go? What about this one activity? Did that work out right? Did this game go the way that we thought it would? Did the kids participate the way? And I'm able to share, hey, yeah, that was great, or no, don't do that again. Why did you put glitter in that box? I mean, really. But anyway, so, be open to input. Be open to hearing how things are going from others, and then make sure that you're encouraging people to be able to share that. That you don't just shut them down right away. Maybe if what they're seeing is just a perspective that maybe isn't the direction you want it to go, and so you're still going to continue with that policy or procedure, but you want to validate them and encourage them and thank them, appreciate, the input that they've given, and then even kind of record it and store it away in case maybe a little bit later you look at it and you think, that might have been something to that. And so really when I'm trying to get directions or go somewhere, that's what I got to do. I got to make a plan. I've got to be consistent and follow it. And then afterwards, was that really the best route? If this is a place I'm going to be going over and over again, is that going to be the best way for me to do it? And so it's not that everything has to be so perfect and rigid, but we do want to make sure that we are staying on track in the direction we're going and following after what God has put on our hearts for ministry to children. That we're not just kind of making it from week to week, but that we're helping these kids grow. That we are helping the volunteers that are serving, we're helping them grow. That we're helping the parents. We're encouraging them and strengthening them and, being their cheerleader, being there for them. That through each one of these things, each one of these steps that we have of this is how we're going to do it, that it leads to people growing closer to Christ. I just want to say thank you so much for allowing me to be here and share tonight on this. I know I'm not always excited about policies and procedures, but when you see how these little things can make a big difference and help you be more effective, it's pretty awesome. So thanks a bunch, guys. Love y'all, and hope to be with you again soon.
Well, welcome back. So as we talk about being in the details, I know it's not very exciting, but written policies and procedures are crucial to some of the details in having a safe and effective children's ministry. So thank you, Ryan, for tackling that topic with us. So Joy, one of the things that Ryan mentioned to us was involving others in creating your policies and procedures. So who are some of those people that you involve when you go to make up your policies?
Yeah, well, I have a group of leaders within my children's ministry team, and a lot of them are parents, some of them are teachers. I also consult with my pastor, but depending on what the issue may be, for example, if it's safety or security, we have a man at church who's over safety and security. So I always want to include him to get his perspective, because that's not really an area that I am an expert in. I know I want the kids to be safe and I needed the area to be secure, but it's what he handles. And so his input and what he thinks will work for us, I always want to listen and lean into that.
Sure. Well, kind of sounds like maybe like an advisory group, which is what we have as well for our children's ministry. And you want to include parents, professionals like you mentioned, other representatives of the other ministries in your church perhaps, and of course some people from your own staff. There's that sort of that collective wisdom I think that you get from everybody is really important. And I think we need to make sure that our procedures are covering all areas. Tonight we've talked about things like the wellness policy, emergencies, what do you do during a tornado, a fire, a hurricane, those sort of things. And then, tonight we even mentioned a dress code. Some people don't even think about that, but particularly maybe even with your staff, what's appropriate to wear when you're coming to minister to the kids. I know in our church, sometimes it's summertime, we have to remind people, hey, this is what's appropriate and not this so much. Or even when we have special activities for the kids, we remind them, hey, there is a dress code and here's what you need to wear. So I think those are some important aspects to remember. And I really love that Ryan mentioned being consistent.
Yes, that's hard.
That's sometimes where we kind of fall apart, is we are inconsistent with our procedures. And so I think that's another great aspect that he mentioned.
Yeah, sometimes in those minutes or in that moment when things get really difficult, it's just easy sometimes to say, oh well, we'll do it this way, just this one time. But yeah, staying consistent is definitely hard. But he also mentioned evaluation, and how we should reevaluate often. And so I just wanted to ask, how often do you think we should reevaluate our policies and procedures?
Well, I would encourage those who are still watching with us, maybe in the comments section there, tell us how often that you're reevaluating your procedures, because we'd love to hear from you. I think it's important that you at least annually review what are our procedures and policies. But it's 2020 right now. So unless you're watching this someday in the future, it's 2020, and it seems like things are changing every day. So I think it really is important to maybe at least every 6 months, if not 3 months, if not monthly, talk to your people what's working, especially if you have some new procedures that are in place. I know you talked about the spacing of the kids. I know at our church, one of the things we're talking about right now are temperature checks, because our school systems have stopped doing those. So should we keep doing them or not? I think that everybody is in a unique position right now. So some of the policies need to be reviewed more frequently than others. I know Leslie here in our office staff was talking about in their preschool ministry, they actually every week are reviewing some of these procedures in their ministries. She even talked about an idea of an exit ticket that the volunteers fill out, and so certainly you can get feedback from your volunteers and your assistants in that manner too. But I think Ryan said something in this whole area that I think is important. He said to be the example and not the exception. And I know that as the leaders, sometimes we feel the pressures, and we need to make sure that we are modeling those procedures and being consistent, as he mentioned. So I hope that you enjoyed that presentation. I hope it's got you thinking about some areas, all of tonight's presentation, some areas where you might be able to improve. Certainly in the comment section, we'd love to hear what your takeaways are from this webinar this evening. Well, again, I want to thank you for joining us. My prayer is that each of these presentations have energized, challenged, and encouraged you in your ministry to kids. I want to invite you to make plans to join us in November for our final children's ministry webinar of the fall. Our topic is a great one. It's going to be Children in Holy Spirit Baptism. Our presenters are Dr. Cheryl Johns, Lance Kolkmeyer, Catherine Creasy, and Caitlin Thornburg. We will be discussing what the Bible has to say about children in the Holy Spirit, how to teach kids about Holy Spirit baptism, and how to lead them to receive this gift. This will be a great webinar for your fellow ministry leaders, your team, your parents, and your pastors. So mark your calendar and share this information. Registration information is available on our website and our Facebook page. We look forward to seeing you then. Thanks again, Joy, for joining me tonight. I want to say thanks to Leslie Green here in our office, as well as our Information Technology Services team at the International Offices for making this possible tonight. We look forward to seeing you in November, and until then, God bless you.